Hey, welcome to Weekday Coronavirus Driven Mind Stuff. My name is George Ortega, and it is 8:52 p.m. on Sunday, June 28th. And this is episode number 56. And let's see, what do I want to, well, I want to talk about two things. One, I think, is like, I want to start off each show, and I hope I'm fated to do this because, sometimes, we have intentions that don't come to be. But I think this is a good intention. I want to start off each show just reiterating where we are in terms of this pandemic. Reiterating what we need to do to not have future pandemics, to virtually eliminate them. I mean, it can't be 100%, but, as close to it as possible, where, for all extensive purposes, we've, eradicated them. And these are like influenza and perhaps bacteria ones also. So, all right. So I want to start with correcting a popular misconception, and that is that that this is a 1 in a 100-year event. And they say that because, the last major pandemic in the United States or across the world, I guess, was in 1918, the Spanish flu. But the problem with that assessment is that it doesn't take into account that that farming, back then, like that pandemic is supposed to have originated on a pig farm, a family pig farm, and family farms, in terms of family animal farms, tend to not be as dangerous as factory farms by any measure. I mean, they tend to be a lot safer. But they're not completely risk-free as they saw back in 1918. I lost my my grandmother, my father's mother, to that pandemic. I think soon after she gave birth to my father, my grandmother died from that. My father was born in 1918. And so, all right, so that's the first point. This is not a 1 in a 100-year event, as people would like to have you believe. People who haven't done the research, people who just kind of recklessly, if they're politicians, because there are politicians who are saying this, they just want to make people feel good for the now and, to hell with the future. But, the reality, and here's where I got to do more research, because I'm I've got to send out another editorial, another message to epidemiologists, to infectious disease experts, just to get somebody, with some reach, some credentials, PhD ideally, and to deliver this message, because coming from someone like me without all that, unfortunately, people don't listen to the facts, without a kind of again, proper credentials for the messenger. So all right, so yeah, I mean, this could be, if the status quo continues, meaning more and more factory farms, just more ag-gag rules. An ag-gag rule is prevents somebody from videotaping, filming, photographing anything that happens in these factories, because they're so horrible. I mean, it's bizarre that a law could come into being to prevent people from doing that, you know, to prevent people from seeing the truth of how barbaric, you know, these institutions are, these factory farms. And, you know, anybody who has a TV who's, you know, they've had commercials that they've shown that, that really, you know, demonstrate this. Anyway, so like, it's all right. The first thing is that, no, this may be one in a 10 or 15 or 20-year event. And again, as we go forward, more factory farms, the risk increases. More, you know, more travel, more, you know, more greater population, just a lot of factors contribute to it becoming more and more risky. And so that's the first point to this. The second point is that, I can do a whole show on this, and maybe I will, I guess. The second point is that the only way, and there's one way, there's only one way to remain relatively risk-free from future pandemic is to end the farming of animals, both on family farms and in factory farms across the world. That's the only way people are going to be safe, because, you know, otherwise this could happen, you know, let's say it takes 3 or 4 years for us to like rebuild our economy from this, get everything back to whatever this new normal looks like. If we leave the status quo intact, this factory farming, we could have another pandemic in 5 years, 10 years, you know, and it could be a lot worse, you know. There's, I think, an R factor or something that like 1 for every person who gets, let's say, COVID-19, if the R factor is 1, they spread it to 1 other person. If it's 2, they spread it to 2 other people. I think the R factor in this is between 1 and 2. But I mean, like, there have been other pandemics where that factor has been 5 or 10. You know, in other words, we might have been really lucky that as contagious as this COVID-19 is, it's not as contagious as ones in the past, or as future ones could be. So all right, that's point 2, that you know, like, we maintain the status quo. We're living in fear, you know, of the next pandemic, you know, and then like, to, you know, so in other words, like, if you're a business, well, you can't really make a business decision lasting, let's say, 10, 15 years, if you can't expect, you know, if you can't know what's going to happen, you know, according to, you know, because of this. So, all right, so point 3, well, you know, let's say we become really virtuous and realize that, you know, that the barbaric treatment of these animals should end tomorrow, tonight, just because they are so barbaric, you know, notwithstanding any danger they pose to humans. I mean, like, let's say we somehow acquired the virtue to end them, you know, either for our sake or for, you know, for the sake of the animals, whatever. Well, we have a choice. Then we will either be able to, we'll have to all go vegan and not eat milk, dairy, eggs, you know, fish, you know, beef, pork, chicken, you know, not eat any of that stuff, or become vegan, you know, or just, you know, I'm not sure all that made sense. Anyway, so anyway, we have a choice. We either, you know, we either become vegan, which, so that's the third point. Like, you know, we've got, that's an option, right? But I don't think that's going to happen. You know, if we were more virtuous individually and collectively, if we were more intelligent individually and collectively, yes, that would and should happen and could happen. But no, I'm sorry, we have to deal with the reality of how people individually and collectively are. And it's a long shot to expect that people will, just become vegan. So point 4, if you're religious, you believe that God does stuff. God did this. There's this saying, God closes a door, opens a window. Okay, so yeah, God closed the door on us, and with this pandemic, closed the door to future factory farms, future factory farming of animals, if we're intelligent enough to heed the warning. But at the same time, and this, I can't believe this would be a coincidence. 7 years, in 2013, 7 years before this, actually 6 years, because I guess this started in November of 2019, but 6 years before this happened, we proved, scientists who were working on this proved that we can grow meat in labs, outside of animals, that doesn't involve any animal cruelty at all, and that for all extents and purposes eradicates future pandemics. We start growing our meat, fish, dairy, eggs in factory farms. We don't have to worry about this. So that's point, what is that, point 4. So, we have a way out. Now, here's the 5th point, and I guess the most important point in terms of our pragmatic challenge here is that, the industry, it's got about 40 or 50 startups that are basically trying to overcome the research and development hurdles that remain before they can scale up this technique, to be able to manufacture and market these products in supermarkets at affordable prices. Now, at the rate they're going, the rate of investment, industry insiders will tell you that it may be 10 or 15 years before that happens. But then let's look at the rate of investment. The company who's received the most money for this out of the 40 or 50 startups received about $160 million this last year. And the rest of them, they're lucky if they get 2 or 3 or 4 million. They're working on a much smaller budgets. So yeah, it's like with that level of investment, kind of makes sense that 10 or 15 years might be a good prediction of when they will meet these challenges. Now imagine if we pumped 10 or 20 or 30 or 40 or $50 billion into this research. And this may seem like a lot, but we've already spent about almost $4 trillion on the economic stimulus packages. And we're not done yet. By the time we're done, this might end up costing us $8-9 trillion. That's just in the United States. That's not even considering the rest of the world. So considering how the economic turmoil, the loss of life, the disruption, the emotional toll, just, considering all that we've gone through with this pandemic, you would think it would be consummately obvious that to spend $50 billion to fast track this research, probably the best investment we can make, barring work on climate change, I guess, because that's, so that's the 5th point. So in other words, like, there's a way out of, and like, so yeah, fine. Everybody's like so affected by this the being distanced, the opening up and all this stuff, that maybe people don't have the bandwidth to step back a little and look at the future. What happens, after the new normal? How do we prevent this from happening again? And like, it's not like they're not doing anything. They're working on, like, strengthening, the CDC and other, mechanisms, institutions, just ways that we have to track these things and contain them. But I don't have much confidence in that because, again, you have a virus, a flu that's a few times stronger than this coronavirus in terms of like, ultimate lethality or contagiousness. And, I would think whatever we come up with in terms of containment measures could easily be overrun, by a certain virus. I mean, it just it doesn't seem that wise to take this half measure, oh yeah, when the next one comes, we'll be better prepared, when we can take the full measure of just preventing this next one from happening. All right, so again, I hope that, because I don't believe we have a free will. I believe everything is determined, destined, fated, God-willed. So I hope that God compels me to just like say this over and over, maybe not taking 20 minutes like I have almost to say it right now, but, a bit more concisely. Maybe each time I say it, it becomes more concise and perhaps more convincing. But so yeah, I hope that happens. In the meantime, I want to pull away from that. Deliver the message. If you know somebody with influence, I would suggest you get them to consider these points that I'm making. Get them to talk with the decision makers. These politicians, they're just not that bright, and it's a problem of our democracy because people who aren't that bright elect people who aren't that bright. It's unfortunate. They want to elect somebody who's like them. Yeah, well, we're lucky that medicine isn't a democracy, that, our doctors aren't democratically elected instead of like having to earn their position. Because like, well, you can just imagine what our healthcare would be like. So yeah, these guys are just not that bright, but maybe among them there are some, I would hope. Anyways, so this, all right, now in the last 10 minutes and 30 seconds, I'm going to focus on my personal part of this. So I've been letting this get me down recently. It was a pretty, these last few days, I've been kind of like feeling discouraged and, just being upset by this, that nobody's getting it, and like my main work for decades has been happiness. I've researched it. I've disseminated the findings on it through a television series, meetup groups, a website, various vehicles. And because the happiness is really what everything is about. Why do we want to, prevent future pandemics? Well, because it makes it easier for more people to be happier, or for less people to be unhappy, to suffer, to die. So anyways, I have been, and this is like this, I talk about some people not being all that bright. I mean, I should really be much better at this, considering I've been at it for years, but apparently living in a society where everything's a distraction from happiness. You turn on the news and they're going to make you worry, and they're going to make you become angry. They're going to push your buttons, because that's how they get people to watch. That's they make people dysfunctional in that way. And then it's kind of like they're news pushers, and we become the news addicts. And once they got us hooked, well, they just pounded and pounded, and and because they're corporate, they only pound it as much as they need to get their ratings and their advertisers. They're not really interested in all that much real change, because if they were, I mean, we would see it. But anyway, what I'm trying to say, so I'm in the process of just shifting back to well, basically telling myself, and this is what I tell people on my TV shows, in my meetups, this pandemic, whatever it is, and anything you want to consider that impinges upon your happiness. It doesn't have to. Basically, in other words, like, the world is filled with a lot of problems, and it will be for a while now. And there are a lot of people who are really happy, and we've been happy, with our lives, even though our lives and the world has a lot of problems. The way we do this is we acknowledge to ourselves that, wait a minute, reality doesn't have to be a certain way for us to be as happy as we want to be, or we believe we should be. And this was incidentally the Buddha's message. Suffering comes from attachments. The real attachment, the fundamental attachment, is that we have this desire to have reality conform to how we believe it should be. I believe people should be much more virtuous, more intelligent, more compassionate, empath, responsible, but the world isn't like that. So the idea is to detach one's happiness from these preconditions. I'm going to be happy if reality is in this way, or if I get this or that, if my life is this way or that way. And I'm not saying that sometimes these things aren't effective at creating happiness, but they're not necessary. And much more often than not, they actually are counterproductive, because by setting up these preconditions, we set ourselves up for disappointment. The world is the way it is, and since we're not God, we can't just at will change it, and so it becomes foolish. It just really becomes literally foolish to allow reality not being the way we want it to be, to impinge upon our happiness, to prevent us from being as happy as we want to be. All right, so that's point one in this. Point two is, we are very much like computers. We're like computers in that, like, our thoughts and feelings, our habitual ways of being have been programmed. And this programming started way before we entered school. It probably started while we were in the womb, but basically we receive messages, and one of the messages we receive is like, oh, wait a minute, it's not even appropriate, it's not right for me to feel happy unless I'm kind of getting what I want, or to a certain extent. That's the programming we receive. So again, the step two of this, point two, is that in order for this realization that reality doesn't have to be the way we want it to be for us to be as happy as we want to be, or need to be, it requires this reprogramming. And this reprogramming, if we were perfect computers, we just change the algorithms, we just change the programming to a different set of conditions, different steps, and it's done. But we're kind of like very imperfect computers, because like with a computer you could do this, and if you do it right, the computer acts according to the new programming immediately, and doesn't revert back to the old programming. But we're kind of like, not very efficient computers. So what happens is, like, we have to repeat, the programming over and over and over until it takes. I mean, and this, we're familiar with this. Like, if we want to learn an instrument or a skill or something, we know that, like, throwing a free ball, like a basketball, free shot, whatever, from the foul line, the more we practice that, the better we're going to get at it. The more we're, let's say, swinging at a baseball, to hit it, the more we do that, the better we get at it. That's, and so, like, it's the same with this happiness stuff. So the idea is, like, to get us, and this, I'm talking to myself, because I doubt any of you are going to, like, well, you may, whatever. But what I do, when I want to boost my happiness, is I just, all right, point three, these messages that, like, I, will not be as happy as I want to be, because reality isn't the way I believe it should be or could be. These messages are not coming from our conscious mind. We don't consciously say this to ourselves. What happens is they originate in our unconscious, and then our conscious makes us aware of them, makes us conscious of this program that somehow long ago it arrived at the unconscious. So the idea is like, what I'm trying to say is our unconscious lies to us a lot. Okay, it makes us believe that again, for example, that we absolutely need things to be a certain way if we're going to be as happy as we want to be and stuff. That's just a lie. It's a lie. It's an untruth. We're going to tell you. And so the idea is like, so we've got this part of us that's lying to us, and with those lies, separating us from our happiness. So it's like there's a principle in self-defense that like we tend to not want to be violent, but if we're if our life is being endangered, we have the right, the moral responsibility even to protect ourselves. So if somebody's shooting at us, we shoot back or whatever, right? So now with this, and it's got about a minute and 40 seconds. I hope we can finish this. So basically, it's like one technique is to lie back to this unconscious. Like you say to yourself, I feel completely happy. And this is what I've been doing recently because I know it works. I mean, the more I do it, the more solidified it becomes and all. But anyway, you start saying to yourself, I feel completely happy. And first you experience a cognitive dissonance, you say, wait a minute, this doesn't seem all that true. But what happens is like with a lot of times with that kind of like phenomenon, you persist with this new message, and then the mind begins to accept it. Yeah, I feel completely happy, even though it may not seem accurate, literally accurate, logically accurate to be completely happy. The mind believes it, and that's what happiness is about. So anyway, like in the last 48 minutes, I think I've explained that. So I hope you're having a great Monday. Catch the show Monday through Friday, White Plains Community Media, channel 76 Optimum, 45 Verizon. And I will keep, again, I want to like hammer down this point of like, we have to fast track cellular agriculture research to prevent future pandemics, close down the factory farms, have lab grown meat. And the other thing, I should really work more on my happiness, because things aren't the way we want them to be, but that doesn't mean we can't be as happy as we need to be. All right, take care, and I'll see you again tomorrow.